Hey everybody, welcome to the first video in my interview series. Today I've got Jeremy Stewart, who's an animation supervisor and creature specialist. We worked together before at Image Engine on The Thing, and a whole bunch of other things, Battleship. You were on Twilight as well, weren't you, or is that?
We're
right.
sitting next to each other for quite a while, so it all
becomes
blurs.
a blur after a while. So since then, you've continued on along the specializing in creatures. What are some of the highlights so far of your career from then on?
Well, as you mentioned, The Thing, Battleship, Ninja Turtles, Jurassic World, Star Trek, Annihilation, Pacific Rim, and now Ant-Man.
Cool. The new Ant-Man.
The new one, yes. Ant-Man
Awesome.
and the Wasp.
So today we're going to talk about these guys in particular, the Crocodilian family, alligators, caimans, and specifically how we can adapt their design into, exaggerate it and build it into something that's supernatural or huge or otherworldly and yet still based on real-world physics and structure.
The last show I worked on, Annihilation, had this giant alligator in it, and that was a really fun project because in that one we were trying to make it as realistic as possible. In that process, I spent a lot of time researching alligators, specifically alligators, but also the whole crocodilian family. And these are fascinating creatures. And what I learned out of that process was, to get that level of realism and to get like a believability in a creature, you got to spend a lot of time researching it and understanding how it's evolved, understanding its anatomy, every single aspect of it. And this same thing applies when you're doing fantasy creatures as well, because you want something that's still somewhat believable. Even if it's an unbelievably fantastic creature, it still needs to be grounded in some kind of reality. So we're going to talk about alligators, and we've got some caimans to show you in the zoo here, and we're going to explain how I learned from that and how you can learn from that too.
So before we go inside with this, how much time would you spend doing sort of internet or book research as opposed to actually going and seeing the animals themselves?
Well, sometimes you can't go see them. So it really depends on how much access you have. But what I find more interesting is finding out the internal workings of a creature as opposed to just looking at it from the outside. I mean, it's easy enough to just copy videos from YouTube or go to your zoo and shoot some reference video. But until you understand how its bones work, how its mind works, like how it's motivated to catch prey, for example, alligators can sit for hours and days waiting for something to jump into its mouth, whereas a lion is actively out stalking creatures, prey, and other animals. So its behavior is completely different, even though Nile crocodile is comparable to a lion. They have completely different strategies for survival.
So if you're trying to get a complete understanding of any animal, especially these guys, would you start with the internal structure and then work on the body mechanics and then move outward to what the surface details look like, or have you got a different procedure?
No, I'd probably just have fun watching YouTube videos for a while. Yeah, that's the easiest place to start and
get a general sense.
And I think that's what I've just done intuitively. But now that I think about it, it's probably the best way to start, because then you can start asking yourself questions like, why do the legs move this way?
Right.
Why does the tail like that? Why is its body designed a certain way? Watching it move, you can look at its anatomy. Then you can find, for Annihilation, I even contacted a zoologist and started asking him a bunch of questions. And he sent me some papers that were written on crocodilian locomotion, which was fascinating. So it's super handy too. But if I didn't have the questions to ask in the first place, I wouldn't have been able to reach out to him. So
makes sense. All right, so if we go and have a look at the caimans now, which are similar to alligators and crocodiles,
all
smaller.
the same family.
What is going to be the first thing you think we should focus on to try and get an understanding of these guys?
That's a good question. I guess it partly depends on what you're going to be animating. if it's an attack sequence or if they're just extras in the background. But what stands out with these creatures is the fact that they barely move. They only move when they're provoked or they see something they can eat. Look at the anatomy, look at the muscle structure. You'd understand that they're just basically made out of solid muscle. So they'd be counterbalancing the weight at their front end with their tail. The whole back would flex, bring it all up. A nice arc, nice line of action going all the way through the back. I mean, that's the beauty of animating a creature like this too, is that it does have a very graceful line of action that you can get some great poses with.
Could you imagine that thing coming at you? Because you wouldn't even see it. It's so fast. The thing is, I've seen this animated poorly lots of times, right? Where they have the top rising up and then coming down.
Should have mentioned, yeah.
And that's I've seen the structure of where the muscles actually attach to this lower jaw, because it's all lower jaw, isn't it?
Yeah. If you animated it from the base of the neck, like you'd think a human moves,
right,
you're making a huge mistake. When the alligator lifts his head, this is all solid bone. Okay?
No joints here at all.
This is the whole skull, the top of the skull, same as ours. It's all bone. Right. So to lift this up, this heavy piece of mass, he's got to engage his whole back.
Oh, right.
So when an alligator chomps down on something, he's just actually relaxing his lower jaw, and then driving his top of his head down, and then
clamping down.
To clamp, the bottom lip, the bottom jaw closes and holds on that bite. But they don't have any muscles really. I mean, that's the whole cliche where you can hold the alligator's jaw shut with your two fingers, like
right,
this, because they're evolved to just chomp down on things.
So Crocodile Hunter's really not that strong after all.
No,
okay.
He's just crazy.
I thought he was superhuman for being able to keep him closed like that. No, okay. Yeah. Myth busted.
Yeah.
Well, these guys sit still for days. You said. Let's go inside and hopefully we can actually get one to move.
Okay.
So we're in the Greater Vancouver Zoo. Here's the caimans. They are basically mini alligators, or mini crocodiles. All right, so with our brief in mind, we need this creature to be able to rise up out of some pretty heavy mud, pushing hard, and take a big bite out of something.
Crocodilians are very slow-moving creatures. They're perfectly adapted. They've adapted they haven't changed in evolutionary terms for millions of years, and they just conserve their energy. They're masters. I mean, look at these guys. You go over the monkey tent over there, and the monkeys just can't stop moving around. These guys are sitting perfectly still. You'd think they were made out of plastic. Because they do not want to waste their...
It was like, no, there's a stuffed one, and there's a real one.
Yeah.
His eyes look dry, and they haven't blinked at all the entire time we've been here.
No.
So when they got the nictating membrane closed, can they just, is it like having your eyes closed? Can they just stay like that indefinitely?
It's more of a protective membrane, so when they have a second eyelid or a third eyelid that will protect their eyes when they go underwater. And also when they're fighting and stuff. They can also pull their eyes into their skull, so that if they're in a death roll or in a fight, they can pull their eyes in and protect them.
So are they closed right now, or are they open?
No, their eyes are wide open.
So they're wide open, yet they don't have to blink.
Yeah. They're in water, so...
No, that one isn't. So that's pretty impressive. They can just stay motionless.
Yeah.
Not having to blink, not having to move at all. I mean, are they even breathing?
Very slowly. I mean, they can sit underwater for hours. They do not need to breathe. There's the zoologist here was telling us about how recently there was a cold snap in Florida where the alligators were trapped under frozen ice for, I assume, days, and they didn't die.
They were still able
They were still. They just slow their metabolism down to next to nothing. And once the temperature got back to normal, they just went about doing their business.
Cool. Okay, let's take a look at some specific things now. I can't see where the shoulder is. I can see the hips quite clearly. The attachment of the hips. But how does the shoulder work in the crocodilian family?
That's something I was quite interested in when I was animating them. because, you know, with a lion or a tiger or something, large cats, when they're creeping along, you can see that shoulder blade
really
pop out of the back, right? Horses too, they have, you know, they have a lot of the floating shoulder blade that sort of.
It's a long scapula that's over top of a rounded rib.
Exactly,
so
and you see it sliding underneath the body there. Alligators do have a shoulder blade, but it's not as big, and their arms and legs are designed for swimming mostly. They're more adapted for the aquatic environment than they are for being on land. So you'll see them, the legs are hanging down, they can pull them into their sides perfectly when they're swimming and form into almost like a snake or torpedo kind of shape, exactly. Yeah. But when they are on land, you see like a slight bump at the back of the neck there.
Right, yeah.
And you will see a bit of movement in the shoulder, but it's not as pronounced as what you'd see in a mammal like a big cat or a horse or a cow or something.
Okay, let's take a look at this one here right now. It looks like front elbows are raised up. Is that like the highest that they can bring their elbows, or how much mobility have they got in that shoulder?
See, if a cat was sitting in that kind of position, its shoulder blades would be poked all the way up. Its back would be flexed. Their entire back isn't that flexible. It's those scales on the back are made out of bone.
So that's going to bone?
No, the bony plates.
Okay, so sort of like the way a wrist would work then. Lots of small bones.
Yeah, well, just it's sort of like a suit of armor.
Okay.
So like a knight's suit of armor.
Okay, so if the shoulder mobility is limited, but we want to exaggerate that, we want it to be able to do something that's a little bit superhuman for a crocodile, what would be the right way to exaggerate? So it didn't look wrong, it just looked...
Right. We had the same challenges on Annihilation when we were trying to get this alligator to chase down people. Typically, they only move in short, quick bursts after a prey or something. You know, they'll typically wait around to catch somebody and then run after them at the last second. So if I had to bend the rules or break the rules, I would still keep that in mind. You know, if I had to have an alligator or a crocodile lunge forward, I would try, you know, unlike a lion or something that's going to use those powerful leg muscles. If you look at the tail is solid muscle. So you can get all that extra power from the back end of the animal. You can use the tail to project it forward. Right. Maybe it can do something.
Kangaroo-like or whatever, just sort of whip through.
Yeah, or push off the tail.
Right.
So that would get it to lunge forward or get it to lunge up. But yeah, this is, like we were talking about earlier, how it's important to understand how this thing is designed, how it's evolved to its environment. And then from there, once you know those parameters, then you can exaggerate it. You can figure out how to get it to look right, even though it's maybe doing something that's somewhat impossible. These are animals that are adapted to living in water. So they're going to wait underneath the water for their prey, use those powerful tails, those leg muscles to swim through the water quickly, and then slide up on land, grab their prey, and then pull it back in the
grab
water.
The center of it, or they have a preferred target? They go for the legs?
I think they go for whatever they can get those jaws on, and that's also like something that's interesting about them too. Is they have such powerful jaws. It doesn't matter where they need to bite their prey. Unlike a lion or something that needs to go for the throat, crush the animal's windpipe. This thing can just bite on anything and drown it.
Okay, so they're not trying to kill it with the bite. They're just trying to latch onto it so they can drag it into the water.
Yeah, and then it's a test of endurance. And the alligator is always going to win. So,
pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah. What's surprising about watching an alligator is the fact that they can get up to speed lightning quick, and that's because they're made out of solid muscle. So, you know, if we go to this other cage here and watch this gecko, it's going to run around, come to a complete stop. An alligator is going to skid when it comes to a stop.
Well, here's one thing I noticed right away about that gecko compared to these these caimans is their bodies are almost completely flat on the ground. Even when they're walking, they're only raising themselves up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Whereas the gecko seems to be able to raise himself up a lot higher. There's a lot less mass to push. Mm-hmm. So his reach is farther, right? If we were...
Well, there's two parts to that, because the gecko is designed to be on land.
That's right.
The alligator's meant to be swimming in water.
Compare specific things, like say how their feet push off when they're taking their step. Compare that to the geckos and see if there's major differences between them, and then
Yeah, well, there will be, because their bone structure is not completely different, but somewhat different than a typical lizard's,
right.
and that's goes back to their environment and how they've evolved.
This guy's creeping me out.
Yeah, he's waiting for
What?
something.
We don't have rats. We have no food for you. You've been fed. Yeah, I can see him breathing now, actually. Watch that. He just moved a little bit and then came back up. I guess that's his breath for the hour.
Yeah.
Wow, even his tail is not moving a millimeter.
No wasted energy.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was really cool. So let's go over this one more time. What would be the path that somebody would have to follow from start to finish to go from an idea or a concept of what they have to animate to final believable conclusion?
Okay. Well, we talked about alligators because that was a show that I did where it was we were trying to get things as realistic as possible. You're not always going to be trying to do something in animation that has to be perfectly real. And I feel strongly that in both cases it takes the same amount of research. Even if you are doing something that is completely fictitious, you need to find something that's grounded in reality as a starting point. My process is I look at video first, then I have a bunch of questions I want to find answers to. I want to find answers to why this creature moves the way it does. So I'll study its anatomy. I also understand why its anatomy is the way it is. So I need to study its environment, the way it's evolved and adapted to its environment. And even go as far as like trying to learn a little bit about its psychology or the size of its brain, and that kind of ties in with the way it's evolved.
Right.
And what's so fascinating about these alligators and why I enjoy talking about these guys so much is the fact that they perfectly evolved to their environments, and they basically stopped evolving millions of years ago because they were too good. So
They became the perfect predator.
yeah, they became perfect eating machine.
Cool. So just following up on one thing you said there is that when you're, if you're not going for realism, you still need to base it on believable reality. Now, if you were designing a creature that was a combination of a bunch of different creatures, or that would be your starting point for research. What other kinds of creatures is this like? Like when they were doing Beauty and the Beast, and they took various different, like a goat and a bear and a bull, and they took not just design features from them, but behavior and posture and body mechanics from all these things, and combined them, and then figured out how would all these work in combination. Because you now have a very strange center of gravity for your character, or you've got different connection points on the muscles than on any creature. So if you have to do multiple species research to build something like that. And like you were saying earlier, it's not about necessarily making it realistic if it's a fantasy creature. It's about making it believable.
Yeah.
Right. So.
This way you get to be a bit more of a fiction writer, but you still have to read about its or figure out its backstory. Same, I guess actors do the same thing. They'll write a backstory for their own character and understand, what is their character's motivations. When you understand a creature's evolution, you understand what its motivations are. Why does a crocodile sit around for hours?
Right.
Because it's a sit-and-wait predator.
Right.
Why does your creature or character do what it's supposed to be doing in your movie? This is something you really need to know and find out.
You have to know what its instincts are as well.
Exactly, yeah. So if you think, okay, well, this is an evil character, he's a predator, you're going to look at predators. And you're going to look at predators that sort of fit the environment or the world that...
or even the personality type.
Exactly, yeah. So somebody who is, is a bit of a liar or something, maybe you'd think, okay, this guy's kind of a snake. That's
right.
A cliche kind of thing, but then you can take a look at like snake-like behavior and see if there's some way you can incorporate that into your character's movements.
Very cool. Well, thanks a lot, Jeremy. This has been fantastic. I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now. So, back here again with Jeremy Stewart, and this time we're in your new studio, Animism.
Yeah, Animism Studios. It's a little venture myself and four of my best friends started. We're focusing specifically on creatures, and here I am to talk more about creature animation. We talked about crocodiles and alligators it was about a month ago now. A little bit tan, and I've had a haircut since, but...
we also were comparing them to lions at one point. We were talking about the difference in, say, the way the shoulder blades moved, and the different behavior pattern where they would be stalking, whereas the crocodilian creatures would just sit and wait for prey to come to them. So you've got some lion animation you've been working on here for something.
Yeah, we're working on a little animation test, but Chris brings up a great point about something we talked about last time, how if you were to go to Africa, you would see lions and giant crocodiles in the same territory, hunting the same kind of prey. They're both at the apex predators at the top of the food chain, and yet they are very different in a lot of ways. So what applies to one animal doesn't always apply to the other, but there's still always underlying principles that you have to keep in mind.
So it's pretty plain from this. If you actually played your reference you were working from, your goal in this is to recreate reality, to take everything there is important, even if you're doing something stylized, you're taking everything there is important about what makes that obviously a lion. Even if you had that in silhouette, it would still be obviously a lion. You drew this as a cartoon version, you would have to exaggerate certain parts of the movement, but it still has to be all the same markers, but bigger, that make it a lion. I think next time we're gonna let's make this a second part. If you don't mind having us back here again.
Of course,
I'd love to
anytime.
Take this idea, your whole process that you've gone through for how you would do the research and study the nature of the animal, extract what's important from it, and then animate that so that it's believable and realistic. And let's go through that same process again, the way you would do it if you were building some fantastic creature that's beyond anything that's real, how you would combine different animals and make something new out of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You know, everything starts with studying the real thing first, and then you use that to build up whether it's a unreal performance or it's a completely unreal character. It all starts with realism. So here, you know, the lion is much different than the alligator, as we said. Lions are made for living on land. Alligators and crocodiles are adapted for the water. Lions use stealth, so do crocodiles, but in a different way. But they're both very heavy creatures. But what you'll notice with the lions is their steps are very soft. When an alligator walks around, its hands flop on the ground. It looks ungraceful when it's walking on land. A lion, big cats, they all look super graceful. Each footsteps looks very delicate. Yet at the same time, you can see that it is a heavy animal.
Put that in the water, though, and you can have a very different looking lion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's why it's obvious when it comes to cats and reptiles, but you know, it's good to understand what environment your creature is adapted for. So here with the lion, if you were to just look at its feet, it doesn't look like a very heavy animal. Each paw just, you know, it flips forward, and then when it touches the ground, its footsteps look very soft. You see all that weight transfer in the shock-absorbing shoulders, in the shake, the tremors that rattle through the muscles and the fat on the body, and you know, in the subtle shifts in the hips, but not so much in when the feet step down onto the ground. Whereas an alligator, you know, it struggles to get its foot forward, and you see it swing forward and slap down. Here, the paws are very nice and soft, and they look You know, it's if you're looking at its feet, it's hard to tell the difference between a lion and a house cat. But looking at the shoulders and the shape and all the little subtle details, it's obvious that this lion is 800 pounds.
Before we wrap this up, I want to learn a little bit more about your studio here and where you're going with this. So you're specializing in creature, but what kind of things are you hoping to do with this? Where do you want the studio to go in the future?
Well, obviously we want, we're all from a creature background. That's what we like doing. You know, we've all come from big studios working on similar projects. And, you know, we know there's a need for more creatures and monsters and stuff in all our favorite TV shows, and that's what we want to do. So,
cool. So are you going to focus on TV or feature or both? Or any?
Yeah, there's very little difference between TV and streaming services nowadays and feature films. Some of the best, my favorite pieces of entertainment are now on TV as opposed to being just in theaters. But you know, I still love going to the movies. So any excuse to bring a creature to life, yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Excellent. So wide range of styles, but narrow range of focus for content.
Maybe a wide range of applications, but not so much styles. We're all very well known for our focus on creature animation. Each of us has a long career in some element of creature animation or creature design or creation. So yeah, that's our strong point, and we're going to try and stick with that.
Excellent. I wish you a lot of success in this.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I've had great mentors along the way, so I think I have a lot of confidence right now. So we'll see.
Yeah, I expect big things from you guys.
Thank you.
All right, we'll touch base again soon when we build ourselves some fantastic creature together.
Yeah.
Right, thanks a lot.
Sounds good. Yeah.